do, we're just going to jump right into this. I want you to know that any sense of negativity that's coming from my end about some of these topics is simply a result of me advocating for you and your creative process. So with that said, this is the writing advice that people often try to give others that we should ignore. When it comes to artistic criticism, whether it be film, music, or in our case, writing, we should focus on whether or not something somebody else has said about our work is actually relevant or useful to our writing process. According to Matthew Arnold, who was the critic way back in the day, those of you who've studied literature should be well aware of who Matthew Arnold is. But the point, he said, the argument that he was trying to make, is the purpose of criticism is to sort of find the best in something, to elevate the form of whatever it is, whether it's poetry, novel writing, whatnot. You're going to use the positives, you're going to use the negatives, and in that sense, you're going to be able to sort of recognize their uses as a sort of evolutionary tool. Can you develop what somebody else has said about your work and turn it into a constructive idea and change with it as an artist or a writer? As an English teacher and as a writer, I wholeheartedly agree with Matthew Arnold. I think the purpose of criticism is to just sort of not be negative about everything, right? Appreciate some of the good, you're going to appreciate some of the bad, and you're going to realize then through this process that it's just natural to development in the artistic process, right? Nothing is going to be perfect the first time. Just ask Shakespeare. I also tend to agree then with this sort of postmodern version of art where when it comes to the creative writing process, we might have standards of things we call good, things we call bad, but it doesn't mean that people shouldn't try, right? Your voice shouldn't be stifled because someone else said so. Nobody has that right over you. And that sort of comes to my main question, my main thesis for all of these sort of videos that I'm making is the question of who is to say? Who's to say you can't be a writer or a photographer or a painter? Who is going to actually come in and stop you, right? If you have the tools and you have the sort of drive to do something, nobody's going to physically come into your space and stop you from doing these things, right? Especially now during the age of people basically getting to do whatever they want and say whatever they want because of social media. I'm talking about things as easy as making videos for a YouTube channel or using Twitter or Instagram and things like that, using these social media outlets to keep yourself engaged, right? And a lot of times, sometimes these things are just noise that are distracting us from what we're trying to focus on. But who's to say that we can't be writers, right? Who's to say that you can't just go publish something on Amazon KDP right now, as long as it doesn't violate certain rules or legal codes, right? You can do that. And especially now in the ebook industry, which is so popular, it's basically going to cost you nothing, right? If you have an idea, if you've got something to sit and type on, you can upload your documents to Amazon KDP, and that's the end of the story, if that's what you choose to do, right? So if you've got the tools and you've got the motivation, which is the next video, to get these things done, it's an entire process, right? Who's to say we don't just go do that? Who's to say you don't just watch this video and the next one, because it's all going to circle back to those ideas of where do we make those first missteps when it comes to self-doubt? Is it something we don't believe in ourselves? Is it something somebody else has said, right? So then we have to question what motivates these critics in using negativity. Why do they feel challenged, right? Why do these people think that their priorities are higher or more complicated than ours, right? Or are they just self-serving people who feel the need to speak about something even though they haven't been asked their opinion, right? Oftentimes these critics are people who can't perform the task that they're trying to tear down, right? Just because you're a food critic doesn't mean you know how to cook, right? And again, to get back on point of the relevance of this, when it comes to writing, why are people using these negative terms? You can look at all these videos I've seen on YouTube, and I guarantee in almost every single title, they use a negative term, such as mistakes, or you need to do this, you need to delete this, avoid these things at all costs. But my number one anger-inducing trope, I guess you'd call it, is when other people call writers new or amateur. guess what? At every point in the history of humankind, every writer has been an amateur. So why do you need to label these other people into a separate, distinctive group, right? What makes you a professional writer, right? Unless you're getting paid, then you can feel free to call yourself a professional, right? But it bothers me when I hear terms like this because it belittles people. It's undercutting to label other people just because perhaps they just want to try something new. They need a new creative outlet. So I've got a major, major problem with people claiming to be great writers or they coming up with these awesome ideas when their criticism is just, they don't know how to explain it, right? They don't like somebody else's writing. Well, why not? I don't know. I just don't. This is why I avoid discussions face to face with people like this, because at the end of the day, when people feel defensive, their logic breaks down, especially when you're trying to have a constructive, rational argument about something. Perhaps it's film, perhaps it's writing, perhaps it's music. You say, I really don't like this genre of music because it's not good. And then you say, well, what isn't good about it? Are they not playing the instruments well enough for you? Oh, I just don't like it, right? Those are not good arguments because the logic falls flat, right? They're not backed up with evidence. I mean, this goes back to English 101. If you can't explain things with examples, why are you even speaking, right? So again, that's not the point of criticism, according to Mr. Arnold. So again, my point in all this is to say, avoid buying too much into what these other people say. Go make mistakes. Don't delete anything because you might want to circle back to something later, right? Don't avoid problems. And if somebody calls you an amateur, just laugh it off, because when it comes to art, nobody with a sense of integrity is doing it solely to make money. So with all that negativity out of the way, I hope to see you in the next video, because the next one is going to go over how we get over the first hurdle of our self-doubt, of listening to these little voices in our head saying you can't do this, blah, 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 and how we're actually going to start our own journey and embrace what motivates us in the first place.